Let's talk about the incredible essay, Machines of Love and Grace. I recommend everybody read it. It's a long one.
It is rather long.
Yeah. It's really refreshing to read concrete ideas about what a positive future looks like. And you took sort of a bold stance because it's very possible that you might be wrong on the dates or the specific applications.
Oh, yeah. I'm fully expecting to will definitely be wrong about all the details. I might be just spectacularly wrong about the whole thing, and people will laugh at me for years. That's just how the future works.
So you provided a bunch of concrete positive impacts of AI and how, exactly a super intelligent AI might accelerate the rate of breakthroughs in, for example, biology and chemistry that would then lead to things like we cure most cancers, prevent all infectious disease, double the human lifespan, and so on. So let's talk about this essay. First, can you give a high-level vision of this essay and what key takeaways that people should have?
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time, and Anthropic has spent a lot of effort on how do we address the risks of AI, right? How do we think about those risks? Like, we're trying to do a race to the top, what that requires us to build all these capabilities, and the capabilities are cool, but we're like a big part of what we're trying to do is address the risks. And the justification for that is well, all these positive things, the market is this very healthy organism, right? It's going to produce all the positive things. The risks, I don't know, we might mitigate them, we might not. And so we can have more impact by trying to mitigate the risks. But I noticed that one flaw in that way of thinking, and it's not a change in how seriously I take the risks, it's maybe a change in how I talk about them, is that, no matter how kind of logical or rational that line of reasoning that I just gave might be, if you kind of only talk about risks, your brain only thinks about risks. And so I think it's actually very important to understand, what if things do go well? And the whole reason we're trying to prevent these risks is not because we're afraid of technology, not because we want to slow it down. It's because if we can get to the other side of these risks, right? If we can run the gauntlet successfully, to put it in stark terms, then on the other side of the gauntlet are all these great things, and these things are worth fighting for, and these things can really inspire people. And I think I imagine, because look, you have all these investors, all these VCs, all these AI companies talking about all the positive benefits of AI, but as you point out, it's weird. There's actually a dearth of really getting specific about it. There's a lot of random people on Twitter posting these kind of gleaming cities and this just kind of vibe of grind, accelerate harder, kick out the decel. It's just this very aggressive, ideological. But then you're well, what are you? What are you actually excited about? Yeah. And so I figured that, I think it would be interesting and valuable for someone who's actually coming from the risk side to try and really make a try at explaining what the benefits are. Both because I think it's something we can all get behind, and I want people to understand. I want them to really understand that this isn't doomers versus accelerationists. This is that if you have a true understanding of where things are going with AI, and maybe that's the more important axis, AI is moving fast versus AI is not moving fast, then you really appreciate the benefits, and you want humanity, our civilization, to seize those benefits, but you also get very serious about anything that could derail them.
So I think the starting point is to talk about what this powerful AI, which is the term you like to use. Most of the world uses AGI, but you don't like the term because it's basically has too much baggage. It's become meaningless. It's we're stuck with the terms, whether we like them or not.
Maybe we're stuck with the terms, and my efforts to change them are futile.
It's admirable.
I'll tell you what else I don't. This is a pointless semantic point, but I keep talking about it
Back
in public,
to naming
so I'm just
again.
I'm just gonna do it once more. I think it's a little like let's say it was 1995 and Moore's law is making the computers faster, and for some reason there had been this verbal tick that everyone was like, well, someday we're going to have like supercomputers, and like supercomputers are going to be able to do all these things that like, once we have supercomputers, we'll be able to like sequence the genome, we'll be able to do other things. And so like, one, it's true, the computers are getting faster, and as they get faster, they're going to be able to do all these great things. But there's no discrete point at which you had a supercomputer and previous computers were not. Like, supercomputer is a term we use, but like, it's a vague term to just describe like computers that are faster than what we have today. There's no point at which you pass a threshold and you're like, oh my God, we're doing a totally new type of computation and so I feel that way about AGI. Like, there's just a smooth exponential. And like, if by AGI you mean like AI is getting better and better, and like gradually it's going to do more and more of what humans do until it's going to be smarter than humans, and then it's going to get smarter even from there, then yes, I believe in AGI. If AGI is some discrete or separate thing, which is the way people often talk about it, then it's kind of a meaningless buzzword.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just sort of a platonic form of a powerful AI, exactly how you define it. I mean, you define it very nicely. So on the intelligence axis, it's just on pure intelligence, it's smarter than a Nobel Prize winner, as you describe, across most relevant disciplines. So, okay, that's just intelligence. So it's both in creativity and be able to generate new ideas, all that kind of stuff. In every discipline, Nobel Prize winner. Okay, in their prime. It can use every modality. So that's kind of self-explanatory, but just operate across all the modalities of the world. It can go off for many hours, days, and weeks to do tasks and do its own sort of detailed planning and only ask you help when it's needed. It can use, this is actually kind of interesting. I think in the essay you said, I mean, again, it's a bet that it's not going to be embodied, but it can control embodied tools. So it can control tools, robots, laboratory equipment. The resource used to train it can then be repurposed to run millions of copies of it. And each of those copies would be independent, that could do their own independent work. So you can do the cloning of the intelligence system.
Yeah. I mean, you might imagine from outside the field that like there's only one of these, right? That like you made it, you've only made one. But the truth is that like the scale up is very quick. Like we do this today. We make a model and then we deploy thousands, maybe tens of thousands of instances of it. I think by the time, certainly within 2 to 3 years, whether we have these super powerful AIs or not, clusters are going to get to the size where you'll be able to deploy millions of these, and they'll be, faster than humans. And so if your picture is, we'll have one and then it'll take a while to make them, my point there was, no, actually you have millions of them right away.
And in general, they can learn and act 10 to 100 times faster than humans. So that's a really nice definition of powerful AI. Okay, so that, but you also write that clearly such an entity would be capable of solving very difficult problems very fast, but it is not trivial to figure out how fast. Two extreme positions both seem false to me. So the singularity is on the one extreme and the opposite on the other extreme. Can you describe each of the extremes?
Yeah.
And why?
So yeah, let's describe the extreme. So like one extreme would be, well, look, if we look at kind of evolutionary history, like there was this big acceleration where, for hundreds of thousands of years, we just had like, single-celled organisms, and then we had mammals, and then we had apes, and then that quickly turned to humans. Humans quickly built industrial civilization. And so this is going to keep speeding up, and there's no ceiling at the human level. Once models get much, much smarter than humans, they'll get really good at building the next models. And, if you write down like a simple differential equation, like this is an exponential. And so what's going to happen is that models will build faster models will build faster models, and those models will build, nanobots that can like take over the world and produce much more energy than you could produce otherwise. And so if you just kind of like solve this abstract differential equation, then like 5 days after we build the first AI that's more powerful than humans, then like the world will be filled with these AIs, and every possible technology that could be invented, like will be invented. I'm caricaturing this a little bit. But I think that's one extreme. And the reason that I think that's not the case is that, one, I think they just neglect like the laws of physics. Like it's only possible to do things so fast in the physical world. Like some of those loops go through, producing faster hardware. It takes a long time to produce faster hardware. Things take a long time. There's this issue of complexity. Like I think no matter how smart you are, like people talk about, oh, we can make models of biological systems that'll do everything the biological systems. Look, I think computational modeling can do a lot. I did a lot of computational modeling when I worked in biology, but there are a lot of things that you can't predict how they're complex enough that just iterating, just running the experiment is going to beat any modeling, no matter how smart the system doing the modeling is.
Or even if it's not interacting with the physical world, just the modeling is going to be hard.
Yeah, I think the modeling is going to be hard, and getting the model to match the physical world is going to be hard.
All right, so he does have to interact with the physical world to verify.
But it's just, you just look at even the simplest problems. I think I talk about the 3-body problem or simple chaotic prediction, or predicting the economy. It's really hard to predict the economy 2 years out. Maybe the case is normal, humans can predict what's going to happen in the economy in the next quarter, although they can't really do that. Maybe a AI system that's, a zillion times smarter can only predict it out a year or something instead of you have these kind of exponential increase in computer intelligence for linear increase in ability to predict. Same with, again, biological molecules interacting. You don't know what's going to happen when you perturb a complex system. You can find simple parts in it. If you're smarter, you're better at finding these simple parts. And then I think human institutions are really difficult. It's been hard to get people. I won't give specific examples, but it's been hard to get people to adopt even the technologies that we've developed, even ones where the case for their efficacy is very, very strong. People have concerns. They think things are conspiracy theories. It's been very difficult. It's also been very difficult to get, very simple things through the regulatory system, right? I think, I don't want to disparage anyone who, works in regulatory systems of any technology. There are hard trade-offs they have to deal with. They have to save lives. But the system as a whole, I think, makes some obvious trade-offs that are very far from maximizing human welfare. And so if we bring AI systems into this, into these human systems, often the level of intelligence may just not be the limiting factor, right? It just may be that it takes a long time to do something. Now, if the AI system circumvented all governments, if it just said, I'm dictator of the world and I'm going to do whatever, some of these things it could do. Again, the things having to do with complexity, I still think a lot of things would take a while. I don't think it helps that the AI systems can produce a lot of energy or go to the moon. Some people in comments responded to the essay saying the AI system can produce a lot of energy and smarter AI systems. That's missing the point. That kind of cycle doesn't solve the key problems that I'm talking about here. So I think a bunch of people missed the point there. But even if it were completely unaligned and, could get around all these human obstacles, it would have trouble. But again, if you want this to be an AI system that doesn't take over the world, that doesn't destroy humanity, then basically, it's going to need to follow basic human laws, right? If we want to have an actually good world, we're going to have an AI system that interacts with humans, not one that kind of creates its own legal system or disregards all the laws or all of that. So as inefficient as these processes are, we're going to have to deal with them because there needs to be some popular and democratic legitimacy in how these systems are rolled out. We can't have a small group of people who are developing these systems say this is what's best for everyone, right? I think it's wrong, and I think in practice it's not going to work anyway. So you put all those things together, and we're not gonna change the world and upload everyone in 5 minutes. I don't think it. I don't think it's going to happen, and B, to the extent that it could happen, it's not the way to lead to a good world. So that's on one side. On the other side, there's another set of perspectives which I have actually in some ways more sympathy for, which is, look, we've seen big productivity increases before, right? Economists are familiar with studying the productivity increases that came from the computer revolution and the internet revolution. And generally, those productivity increases were underwhelming. They were less than you might imagine. There was a quote from Robert Solow: "You see the computer revolution everywhere except the productivity statistics." So why is this the case? People point to the structure of firms, the structure of enterprises, how slow it's been to roll out our existing technology to very poor parts of the world, which I talk about in the essay, right? How do we get these technologies to the poorest parts of the world that are behind on cell phone technology, computers, medicine, let alone, newfangled AI that hasn't been invented yet? So you could have a perspective that's like, well, this is amazing technically, but it's all a nothing burger. I think Tyler Cowen, who wrote something in response to my essay, has that perspective. I think he thinks the radical change will happen eventually, but he thinks it'll take 50 or 100 years. And you could have even more static perspectives on the whole thing. I think there's some truth to it. I think the time scale is just too long. And I can see it. I can actually see both sides with today's AI. So, a lot of our customers are large enterprises who are used to doing things a certain way. I've also seen it in talking to governments, right? Those are prototypical, institutions, entities that are slow to change. But the dynamic I see over and over again is, yes, it takes a long time to move the ship. Yes, there's a lot of resistance and lack of understanding. But the thing that makes me feel that progress will in the end happen moderately fast, not incredibly fast, but moderately fast, is that you talk to what I find over and over again in large companies, even in governments, which have been actually surprisingly forward-leaning. You find two things that move things forward. One, you find a small fraction of people within a company, within a government, who really see the big picture, who see the whole scaling hypothesis, who understand where AI is going, or at least understand where it's going within their industry. And there are a few people like that within the current US government who really see the whole picture. And those people see that this is the most important thing in the world, and so they agitate for it. And the thing, they alone are not enough to succeed because they're a small set of people within a large organization. But as the technology starts to roll out, as it succeeds in some places, in the folks who are most willing to adopt it, the specter of competition gives them a wind at their backs because they can point within their large organization. They can say, look, these other guys are doing this, right? One bank can say, look, this newfangled hedge fund is doing this thing. They're going to eat our lunch. In the US, we can say, we're afraid China's going to get there before we are. And that combination, the specter of competition, plus a few visionaries within these, the organizations that in many ways are sclerotic, you put those two things together and it actually makes something happen. I mean, it's interesting. It's a balanced fight between the two because inertia is very powerful. But eventually, over enough time, the innovative approach breaks through. And I've seen that happen. I've seen the arc of that over and over again. And it's like the barriers are there. The barriers to progress, the complexity, not knowing how to use the model, how to deploy them are there. And for a bit, it seems like they're going to last forever, like change doesn't happen. But then eventually change happens and always comes from a few people. I felt the same way when I was an advocate of the scaling hypothesis within the AI field itself and others didn't get it. It felt like no one would ever get it. It felt like we had a secret almost no one ever had. And then a couple years later, everyone has the secret. And so I think that's how it's going to go with deployment to AI in the world. It's going to, the barriers are going to fall apart gradually and then all at once. And so I think this is going to be more, and this is just an instinct. I could easily see how I'm wrong. I think it's going to be more like 5 or 10 years, as I say in the essay, then it's going to be 50 or 100 years. I also think it's going to be 5 or 10 years more than it's going to be, 5 or 10 hours, because I've just seen how human systems work. And I think a lot of these people who write down these differential equations, who say AI is going to make more powerful AI, who can't understand how it could possibly be the case that these things won't change so fast, I think they don't understand these things.
So what do you use the timeline to where we achieve AGI, aka powerful AI, aka super useful AI?
I'm going to start calling it that.
It's a debate about naming. on pure intelligence. It can smarter than a Nobel Prize winner in every relevant discipline and all the things we've said. Modality, it can go and do stuff on its own for days, weeks, and do biology experiments on its own. In one, you know what? Let's just stick to biology because
Yeah.
you sold me on the whole biology and health section. That's so exciting from just I was getting giddy from a scientific perspective. It made me want to be a biologist.
It's almost it's so no. This was the feeling I had when I was writing it. That it's like this would be such a beautiful future if we can just make it happen, right? If we can just get the landmines out of the way and make it happen. There's so much beauty and elegance and moral force behind it. If we can just. And it's something we should all be able to agree on, right? Like as much as we fight about all these political questions, is this something that could actually bring us together? But you were asking when will we get this?
When do you think? What's just put numbers on?
So
the table.
This is of course the thing I've been grappling with for many years, and I'm not at all confident. Every time if I say 2026 or 2027, there will be like a zillion like people on Twitter who will be like, AI CEO said 2026, 2020, and it'll be repeated for like the next 2 years that like, this is definitely when I think it's going to happen. So whoever's excerpting these clips will crop out the thing I just said and only say the thing I'm about to say. But I'll just say it anyway.
Have fun with
it. So if you extrapolate the curves that we've had so far, right? If you say, well, I don't know, we're starting to get to like PhD level, and last year we were at undergraduate level, and the year before we were at like the level of a high school student. Again, you can quibble with at what tasks and for what. We're still missing modalities, but those are being added. Like computer use was added, like imaging was added, like image generation has been added. If you just kind of like, and this is totally unscientific, but if you just kind of like eyeball the rate at which these capabilities are increasing, it does make you think that we'll get there by 2026 or 2027. Again, lots of things could derail it. We could run out of data. We might not be able to scale clusters as much as we want. Like, maybe Taiwan gets blown up or something, and, then we can't produce as many GPUs as we want. So there are all kinds of things that could derail the whole process. So I don't fully believe the straight line extrapolation. But if you believe the straight line extrapolation, we'll get there in 2026 or 2027. I think the most likely is that there's some mild delay relative to that. I don't know what that delay is, but I think it could happen on schedule. I think there could be a mild delay. I think there are still worlds where it doesn't happen in 100 years. The number of those worlds is rapidly decreasing. We are rapidly running out of truly convincing brocklers, truly compelling reasons why this will not happen in the next few years. There were a lot more in 2020. Although my guess, my hunch at that time was that we'll make it through all those blockers. So sitting as someone who has seen most of the blockers cleared out of the way, I kind of suspect, my hunch, my suspicion is that the rest of them will not block us. But look at the end of the day, like I don't want to represent this as a scientific prediction. People call them scaling laws. That's a misnomer. Like Moore's law is a misnomer. Moore's law, scaling laws, they're not laws of the universe. They're empirical regularities. I am going to bet in favor of them continuing, but I'm not certain of that.
So you extensively describe sort of the compressed 21st century, how AGI will help set forth a chain of breakthroughs in biology and medicine that help us in all these kinds of ways that I mentioned. So how do you think, what are the early steps it might do? And by the way, I asked Claude good questions to ask you. And Claude told me to ask, what do you think is a typical day for a biologist working on AGI look like in this future?
Yeah.
Claude is curious.
Let me start with your first questions, and then I'll answer that. Claude wants to know what's in its future, right?
Exactly.
Who am I going to be working with?
Exactly.
So I think one of the things I went hard on in the essay is, let me go back to this idea of, because it's really had an impact on me. This idea that within large organizations and systems, there end up being a few people or a few new ideas who kind of cause things to go in a different direction than they would have before, who kind of disproportionately affect the trajectory. There's a bunch of kind of the same thing going on, right? If you think about the health world, there's like trillions of dollars to pay out Medicare and, other health insurance. And then the NIH is $100 billion. And then if I think of like the few things that have really revolutionized anything, it could be encapsulated in a small fraction of that. And so when I think of like, where will AI have an impact? I'm like, can AI turn that small fraction into a much larger fraction and raise its quality? And within biology, my experience within biology is that the biggest problem of biology is that you can't see what's going on. You have very little ability to see what's going on and even less ability to change it, right? What you have is this, like from this, you have to infer that there's a bunch of cells that within each cell is, 3 billion base pairs of DNA built according to a genetic code. And there are all these processes that are just going on without any ability of us as, unaugmented humans to affect it. These cells are dividing. Most of the time that's healthy, but sometimes that process goes wrong and that's cancer. The cells are aging. Your skin may change color, develops wrinkles as you age. And all of this is determined by these processes, all these proteins being produced, transported to various parts of the cells, binding to each other. And in our initial state about biology, we didn't even know that these cells existed. We had to invent microscopes to observe the cells. We had to invent more powerful microscopes to see, below the level of the cell to the level of molecules. We had to invent X-ray crystallography to see the DNA. We had to invent gene sequencing to read the DNA. Now, we had to invent protein folding technology to predict how it would fold and how they bind and how these things bind to each other. We had to invent various techniques for now we can edit the DNA as of, with CRISPR as of the last 12 years. So the whole history of biology, a whole big part of the history is basically our ability to read and understand what's going on and our ability to reach in and selectively change things. And my view is that there's so much more we can still do there, right? You can do CRISPR, but you can do it for your whole body. Let's say I want to do it for one particular type of cell, and I want the rate of targeting the wrong cell to be very low. That's still a challenge. That's still things people are working on. That's what we might need for gene therapy for certain diseases. And so the reason I'm saying all of this, and it goes beyond this to gene sequencing, to new types of nanomaterials for observing what's going on inside cells, for, antibody drug conjugates. The reason I'm saying all this is that this could be a leverage point for the AI systems, right? That the number of such inventions, it's in the mid double digits or something, mid double digits, maybe low triple digits over the history of biology. Let's say I have 1 million of these AIs, can they discover 1,000, working together, can they discover thousands of these very quickly? And does that provide a huge lever instead of trying to leverage the, $2 trillion a year we spend on, Medicare or whatever? Can we leverage the 1 billion a year that's spent to discover, but with much higher quality? And so what is it like, being a scientist that works with an AI system? The way I think about it actually is, so I think in the early stages, the AIs are going to be like grad students. You're going to give them a project. You're going to say, I'm the experienced biologist. I've set up the lab. The biology professor or even the grad students themselves will say, here's what you can do with an AI, AI system. I'd like to study this. And, the AI system, it has all the tools. It can look up all the literature to decide what to do. It can look at all the equipment. It can go to a website and say, hey, I'm going to go to, Thermo Fisher or, whatever the lab equipment company is, dominant lab equipment company is today. In my time, it was Thermo Fisher. I'm going to order this new equipment to do this. I'm going to run my experiments. I'm going to, write up a report about my experiments. I'm going to, inspect the images for contamination. I'm going to decide what the next experiment is. I'm going to write some code and run a statistical analysis. All the things a grad student would do, there will be a computer with an AI that the professor talks to every once in a while, and it says, this is what you're going to do today. The AI system comes to it with questions. When it's necessary to run the lab equipment, it may be limited in some ways. It may have to hire a human lab assistant to do the experiment and explain how to do it, or it could use advances in lab automation that are gradually have been developed over the last decade or so, and will continue to be developed. And so it'll look like there's a human professor and 1,000 AI grad students. And, if you go to one of these Nobel Prize winning biologists or so, you'll say, okay, well, you had like 50 grad students. Well, now you have 1,000, and they're smarter than you are, by the way. Then I think at some point it'll flip around where the AI systems will be the PIs, will be the leaders, and they'll be ordering humans or other AI systems around. So I think that's how it'll work on the research side.
And they would be the inventors of a CRISPR type technology.
They would be the inventors of a CRISPR type technology. And then I think, as I say in the essay, we'll want to probably turning loose is the wrong term, but we'll want to harness the AI systems to improve the clinical trial system as well. There's some amount of this that's regulatory, that's a matter of societal decisions, and that'll be harder. But can we get better at predicting the results of clinical trials? Can we get better at statistical design so that clinical trials that used to require 5,000 people and therefore needed $100 million in a year to enroll them, now they need 500 people in 2 months to enroll them? That's where we should start. And can we increase the success rate of clinical trials by doing things in animal trials that we used to do in clinical trials, and doing things in simulations that we used to do in animal trials? Again, we won't be able to simulate it all. AI is not God. But can we shift the curve substantially and radically? So I don't know. That would be my picture.
Doing it in vitro and doing it. I mean, you're still slowed down. It still takes time, but you can do it much, much faster.
Yeah. Can we just one step at a time? And can that add up to a lot of steps? Even though we still need clinical trials, even though we still need laws, even though the FDA and other organizations will still not be perfect, can we just move everything in a positive direction? And when you add up all those positive directions, do you get everything that was going to happen from here to 2100 instead happens from 2027 to 2032 or something?